Okay, we are back here at SHOT Show 2018. Actually, we've never left. But I have somebody really, really cool in front of me. His name's Steve Gaspar. Steve, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. So, this is our second episode for the narrative Unsuppressed Gun Talk Radio. Pretty excited about it. But we are here, rightfully so, recording in Las Vegas, wrapping up SHOT Show 2018 yet again. So how's your show going?
Show's good. I've been actually have an assignment on covering new suppressors, so got out and saw some new stuff, and then things that are sort of proximate to that, so adjustable gas blocks or other gas mitigation stuff. So
really cool, which I think is something that, we're on the theme of suppressors, so why not cover the enabling equipment, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Usually the first thing when I talk to people about suppressors is, if they don't know about them, are those legal? And then you go through that whole discussion, and try to be nice and welcoming, right? Because they're showing interest, and then you explain it to them, and then you get to the paperwork, and they usually have trouble right about the time you tell them about the wait time. But if they can get past that and they do the work and they get their can, eventually they figure out that they may, with most cans, have some gas in the face issues. Not all. They're all a little bit different, but most of the time they'll want to try to mitigate that. And so I'm seeing more developments with that. I mean, adjustable gas blocks have been around for a long time, but new designs and then other types of mitigation systems.
Absolutely, man. So, that's one thing that I've seen here this year is a lot of, we'll just call it enabling equipment to suppressors. For the last couple of years, I think suppressors have kind of been the theme, so to speak. Every year, SHOT Show's got more, and from what I've seen, more of an unofficial theme that we like to, that the industry kind of gravitates towards. And for the last couple of years that I've seen, it's been suppressors. So, the HPA's been hot and heavy up until, a month or two ago?
Yeah. That got everybody excited. Everybody I'll admit I was hoping, too, that things would happen quickly when President Trump got elected, and we saw a lot of support and hope there. But that's not how politics actually works. So I think the industry saw a lot of folks kind of lean back away from purchases because they thought something wonderful was going to happen. And don't get me wrong, if it happened, it would be wonderful, because there's no reason I shouldn't be able to buy what amounts to a hunk of metal over the counter. It's no more dangerous. My shovel is actually more dangerous than my suppressor.
Your shovel is a lot more dangerous than a lot of guns that you have. If you really peel back the layers of that onion.
That's true, especially some days when I shoot. But yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I feel you, man. So, as far as suppressors are concerned, why don't we regulate? So, if I got to go get a muffler replaced on my car, why don't we regulate that, Steve?
Right. So, yeah. And the odd thing is it's backwards, right? So, most states or local governments will have an ordinance which says I must have a muffler, a noise canceling device on my car, and I'll get in trouble if I don't have one.
Ticketed.
Right, ticketed. Then this is the opposite. If I want to have something that protects my hearing and is also dampening the noise for others, stopping at the source like a suppressor does, I have to go through a big process for that. And the reality is, I mean, as you know, Scott, if criminals aren't going to follow the laws anyway, by definition, and so trying to have restrictions around suppressors makes no sense. But it's all about dollars and votes, right?
It's all about the dollars and votes. And on top of that, I mean, let's be honest, shooting a suppressed firearm, whether it be a shoulder fired or a pistol, doesn't make that firearm as quiet as you see on the movies. And I think that is a very, very common misconception, and we could go down a very deep rabbit hole on that, actually.
Right. Yeah, easily. I mean, I think most people don't understand that has a lot to do with the microphones that are used and how they cut out. I did a comparison on a video a couple of years ago, and I think it's still out on YouTube. But just got a firearm, and I have a QD attachment to it, so I show with and without suppressed. Did a couple different firearms, And you can tell that there's a big difference on the video, but you cannot appreciate what it's like in real life. So that's one thing. And then Hollywood's Hollywood, right? I would say 90% of the public gets their suppressor information from movies.
Hollywood is old school social media. Whatever is going to get the most amount of eyeballs and the most of traction in the least amount of time, they're going to put it on the screen, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. And it's make believe land, right? So it doesn't matter if it's true or not, similar to social media. But yeah, they'll and it's, if you can make things look completely silent and everything. And I always like the ones where it's a full auto rifle and it's making the little pew pew sound. Yeah. Like the Nerf gun or whatever.
Or like old James Bond movies, the pew. I mean, we're on an audio show, so it's, it's very hard to mimic that sound without sounding completely ridiculous.
Pew.
I mean, we try.
Yeah.
We try. We can only try. So, aside from all that, and we would love to have you back to talk about suppressors only, because that is going to be a very hot topic, I feel, as we move closer to some sort of legislation as it pertains to suppressors on firearms. So I would like to talk to you about Steve Gaspar and what you do.
What do I do?
What do you do? A lot, man. Actually, so Steve and I, we actually met a few years ago on a prairie dog hunt.
We did.
With Smith & Wesson.
We did. Yeah, it was good times.
I have not
Rolling
laughed.
Thunder.
Rolling Thunder. Steve actually made a DVD. I have not laughed that hard, I don't think.
Very limited edition.
Very.
Members only.
Yep. But nonetheless, so we were invited to do a media event to go out and showcase Smith & Wesson firearms.
Yeah, we shot ARs and bolts and
at prairie dogs.
Yeah.
I had never hunted anything other than pheasant and deer up to that point. And, pheasant and deer and a couple coyotes here and there.
Yeah. Well,
So
I remember you dish ragged a few, so that was pretty fun.
I also dish ragged a mirror. You weren't going to say it. I
wasn't going to say it.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to say it. So the guy in the truck, so you got to back up a little bit. That particular trip was in Wyoming on private ground, and we were allowed, not just allowed, but our host had us in a vehicle, and then we would, it's a little bit different type of deal for those that do prairie dog hunts. A lot of time prairie dogs are in great big towns, and so you just set up high and you shoot for a long time. This is different. And so we'd roll along and we'd shoot, maybe a dozen, maybe less, and then that would be it for that spot, and you'd roll along. And so we were shooting out of a vehicle, which was perfectly legal in that situation. And we did have a safety brief at the beginning about shooting, watching your line of fire and
compensating for your offset of your barrel, your bore, and your sight axis.
Right. So the guy in the truck, 3 guys in the truck, and the one guy with the most legit downrange experience puts a round through. Now we're lucky. Not
1, but 2. I'll go on record and tell everybody that's listening 2 rounds.
Yeah.
Because I was having so much fun shooting prairie dogs. So basically what had happened was I was sitting in the front. And my muzzle, the scope, what we were running Bushnell, right? We were running Tactical Elites or something.
Yep.
So my Bushnell Tactical Elite scope was, I had a clear line of sight. I had multiple prairie dogs right in the center of that scope. However,
offset.
My muzzle was not.
Yeah.
My muzzle was not. So
approximately 2.75 inches below the line of sight.
Semantics, but anyhow, I shot 1 round and I'm like, I know I hit this prairie dog because it was all of about 7 feet away from me, but he sat there and looked at me, laughing, taunting me.
Yes.
So I put another round, what I thought was into the dog, and I'm like, the scope's off, and then I moved, not because I identified that my muzzle was lined up with the mirror, but I moved and then shot the prairie dog. And after that, we get out, and the back of the mirror, actually, the facade on the back of the mirror was laying on the ground, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. And then I saw the one hole.
Yeah, it got launched.
In my defense, though, it was same point of aim because there was one hole.
Yeah, at a distance of 2 inches.
Well, whatever.
One ragged hole.
Right.
Yeah.
So, all right. So,
yeah, so that's how we met, and so yeah, I think we might have even done one coyote stand there, but that was one of those things where everybody wanted to go, a lot of new shooters.
Yep.
And I tried to, kind of do a brief like I do. I've taken a lot of people coyote hunting for the first time. And the biggest thing with coyote hunting, in my opinion, what I've learned is the first thing is you have to go where the coyotes are, right? So it sounds pretty basic, but that's a big deal. We were told there were coyotes in the area, so check the box. Second thing is your approach. And that's one I'd say is the number two thing after you know they're there is your approach, because if you approach by making noise, they will no longer be there, and it negates number one. So I kind of tried to talk about that a little bit with some of the other riders in the car, and I remember one rider who got offended, not present company, got offended that I was telling them what to do. They knew what they were doing, and so of course when we piled out of the truck, everybody's making noise, and so it wasn't a real hunt. It got people out. But I like doing that. I like getting people out. I've taken two of my sons on their first coyote hunts, and it's just fun to get people into the game.
So up to this point, how long have you been hunting? How long have you been predator hunting?
I'd say seriously predator hunting, just probably only about 10 years, something like that. I was originally, when I first, I taught myself how to hunt originally because my dad was a great fisherman, and he taught us how to do that, but he was not allowed to have a gun in the home when he grew up, so he just wasn't a hunter. And so I found that on my own, and I taught myself how to hunt upland birds, and I got a bird dog. I learned how to train my own bird dog, and I was doing that for a long time. And then I transitioned to coyote hunting a little bit more. I still bird hunt, but I transitioned to coyote hunting a little bit more. I saw some people doing it, and I tried it. And the first time I called one in, it was just real exciting to call in a predator, and
in his house.
It basically, yeah, you're in their backyard, you're in their bedroom or their kitchen or whatever, depending on what you're imitating. If you're imitating a dying rabbit, that's their kitchen. If you're imitating his woman,
Mm-hmm.
you're in the bedroom, right? And you're trying to get him to come in, but from the very first time, is a lot of adrenaline once you see them. They're extremely smart. Their eyesight's way better than ours. Their sense of smell is way better than ours. Their sense of hearing's way better than ours. And so it's a challenge. Given all those challenges, I like to not fight fair if I can help it.
Right.
So I use this. You could call it overkill equipment if you want, but I use what I use because I can, and because
it works.
And it works, and
And
it's
it
fun.
works.
It's fun. I mean, I only shoot suppressed for coyotes. I use an AR in 223, and I use Hornady 60 grain VMAX ammunition. I have an SRT Hurricane titanium suppressor from Doug Melton, and I've got that particular upper I use is from AR Performance Harrison Bean in Florida, and I use on that rifle I've mostly used Leupold optics.
What's your most preferred?
Well, again, overkill, and my eyes are getting, so I test better in my shooting eye still to this day, better in 2020, so I'm like 2015 on shooting eye. The other one's not as good, so I can still, at range, I'm good, and so I try to use decent optics. I use a Mark 6,
Okay.
3-18, which is overkill, and I've been looking at some of the lighter ones, because realistically, I don't, past 400 yards, I probably will try to get the coyote to come in more or stalk towards them. And so, if you've got 6X, if you got like a 1-6 or something, or even a 2-10, you could use that. And I've shot coyotes with a muzzleloader. So you
are a non-discriminatory predator hunter.
right. Yeah.
Right?
I'll use anything, but if I'm grabbing my go-to gear, it's a suppressed AR, and it's Cerakoted, and it's I do, people, there's lots of debates about a lot of aspects of this, but I wear just camo pants, a ghillie top, and then I've made my own ghillie, it's like a hood, but
Like a veil.
yeah, and then I wear a face mask, and I've had them charge in. I mean, I think I was telling you this the other day. I shot a big male in Montana this year. Called him in, and he was screaming in. I mean, just running in to kick somebody's butt. Big alpha male, and I dumped him at 30 yards, and he skidded when he hit.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun.
30 yards.
30 yards. And
didn't see you, didn't smell you, nothing.
30 yards in closing. And so, I mean, I just laid down on a stock dam. There's snow. Snow is great, by the way. If I can hunt coyotes in fresh snow, that's the best way to do it, because you can spot them from farther away. You can see the movement because of the contrast of them instead of just the brown background. It's a lot harder to see them moving.
So where I hunt coyotes, and I'm nowhere near your level, hence why I wanted to have Steve on the show, because just in the few days that we spent together in Wyoming, obviously a lot of conversation when it was serious went to coyote hunting, something that I've always wanted to get into more, I wouldn't say full-time, but on a more regular basis. And since I've, been talking to Steve, I asked him what the best electronic call was, and he said Fox Pro right off the jump.
Absolutely.
So I got a Fusion. So,
yep.
So anyhow, that's kind of how the coyote conversation started. Learned a lot from you, but I'm still trying to work on outsmarting the apex predator. So,
yeah.
I go out with the different urine smells and all these different things. However, I only hunt about 1,000 acres in western Illinois, eastern Iowa, right? So, in doing that, that's a much different terrain than in Washington or Oregon, like where you're from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does the gear differ from place to place? And I don't mean gear meaning camouflage, because that is pretty obvious. I mean, when I'm setting the calls up on my Fox Pro, should I set them up differently in Illinois versus Oregon? Or is it pretty much standard across the board? Coyote speaks pretty fluent coyote across from border to border.
Yeah, I'll give you my opinion, and I'm sure other people have different opinions, but I think it kind of doesn't matter geographically. That said, I think that the smart thing to do is to figure out what seems to be working, and if it isn't working, what you're doing isn't working, then just change it, and then notice things. Notice what works. The other day, for example, I accidentally bumped my remote on my Fox Pro call when I was setting up, and I wasn't quite ready. I use hand calls and I use electronic in combination. In that particular stand, I was intending on only using hand calls, so I did a quick call, and then as I was fumbling around, I moved or something, I hit that remote, and I accidentally set off the pup distress. I had no intention of hitting the pup distress or even using it in that situation. But what happened was, it wasn't even 5-10 seconds from when I hit it. I looked up, I caught movement. I've got 3 coyotes coming in at me hard. So,
just cruising.
Oh, flying at me. And that's, again, back to, well, why do you do it? I challenge anybody to not get an adrenaline buzz when you see 3 coyotes barreling at you looking to kick some ass. I mean, it's just fun. And then dropping the hammer on them is good too. It's a game of deception. But back to the calls, I mean, in that instance, I learned, okay, right then, at that time of year, in that spot, pup distress seemed to be just lighting a fire under them. So, file that away and try it again on the next stand. So as far as, just got to, I think you got to try things and keep trying until you find what works and then stick with that.
Okay. So part of what we are trying to accomplish or trying to do with this podcast, with this radio show, is create value, but create not only with anybody who's listening, but new shooters, new hunters, new just people that are new in the industry, right? So the biggest thing that I'm still trying to figure out, and I will go on the record and say that I am nowhere near your experience level or that meticulous in what you do and how you do it when you're hunting predators. So can you give us a quick down and dirty of what that call looks like, what that call sounds like for, let's say, your homeland, your home state, in the place that you hunt a lot? So you come out there, you set up, you give a quick locator call first. And
It depends. The average thing that I would do, the most typical thing I would do would be, again, I'm going to where I know there's coyotes, so go where they are. Step number one. Step number two is approach, and that is you be quiet. I mean, you be kind of still hunting deer through the woods quiet. You don't have to do that, and I've been successful not doing that. I've been more successful when I do that. So I'm very conscious of, basic things like closing the door quietly. You're gonna have some choices. You're gonna have some choices around dropping the bolt on that AR, right, to get that first round in. And that's a big noise, and so you're gonna have to try to be quiet about that. A guy that I coyote hunt with a lot, he and I do a 3-2-1 count, and we drop the bolt at the same time, so that's only one time it's making noise. Little things like that. That's the other thing too, is if you're hunting with somebody, you gotta, it's kind of like a marriage. You gotta be willing to say what needs to be said. So if you notice your buddy is,
without hurting feelings.
well, then just take it in the, you gotta be able to understand, take it with the intent that's intended or whatever. I didn't say that right, but you're both trying to do the same thing. So if you notice your buddy is dragging his feet, making noise, you gotta say, hey, I noticed this, pick it up, and to not take offense when they give you pointers too.
Because we as gun people, we like to think that we are typically a bunch of bad dudes or bad women that know everything about everything when it comes to guns, right?
Yeah, it's
it's just kind of it's the culture, the subculture, whatever you want to call it. So, and I think that's a very valid point. And having been a trainer and a student of the gun for as long as I personally have, that is something that has been both easy and hard to get through. Not only the people that I teach, and when I'm learning. So I can think of one person that sticks out in the back of my head that as an instructor, I question nothing he says, yet can think outside the box and use what I've learned and apply it, and that's Buck Doyle with follow through. The guy has the adult learning theory down to a science. He is efficient and effective when it comes to shooting, but not only shooting, but long range shooting where there's numbers involved, and shooting where there's theory involved, and how you
a little bit of math,
everything. So it's cool that you brought that up, because a lot of times as gun people, when somebody gives you a pointer on something you've been doing for so long, you think in the back of your head, well, who are you?
Right. So, and that's, when you first start out with somebody, talking about things ahead of time is important, and what I try to do is we talk on the way in the truck, and I explain to them, this is all the talking we're going to do. And once we close the door quietly, this is what we're going to do as far as loading the guns. And we are not going to talk anymore. And that's not quite literally true, because we whisper and use hand motions and stuff, but you just are not going to talk anymore, because
overt communication ceases to exist once you close those doors.
It does, because they can hear you so well. And so back to the stand, so now we know there's coyotes in the area. We have gotten out of the vehicle quietly. We're doing a quiet approach. What would happen then is, so I've shot coyotes very close to the truck, but that's not normal. I mean, usually coyotes have gotten road wise, and they know that danger comes from trucks that are on the road. So you want to get back a little bit, and the more you're willing to go the extra mile, the more coyotes you're going to get into, in my opinion. If you want to follow somebody that really knows what they're doing, James O'Neill of O'Neill Ops, those guys slay coyotes, and they have some of the best footage. They have the best footage out there on coyote hunting and predator hunting. And if you listen to them very long, you'll see right away that they pack in, they go in a little farther. So anyway, now we're away from the truck. And then you have to decide, the next thing you have to decide is, where will I kill the coyote? And where will I kill the coyote means you have to think about, well, where's the most likely approach? And coyotes will never be predictable, but you can kind of play the odds. and put yourself in a position where you can see where they will be, and that's where you want to kill them. And you think, okay, if I call and you look at the wind, they will most of the time try to circle around downwind from the call and try to figure out what it is. They really trust their noses a lot. So you decide where you're going to kill the coyote, and if you're going to place an electronic caller, you go ahead and place that, and then you set up.
How far away do you place it from your set?
Depends on the set. For example, sometimes it'll be right next to me because I don't want to expose myself, because if it's a wide open area, I don't want things to be able to see me from a mile or more away as I come out of cover.
Depending on where you're contrasted, right?
Yes.
What's behind your foreground
exactly.
and your background.
You don't want to skyline yourself. You don't want to be on the top of a hill. You want to be, 2/3 up the way of a hill is a good place to be because you have the elevation and you're typically not skylined. You breaking up your outline's important. So while their sense of smell is unbelievable and their sense of hearing is great, their eyesight is designed to pick up movement. So if you can break up your outline, then you should be in good shape. And so you don't want to have, by skyline I mean don't be on the top of a hill so the sky is blank behind you and it can see your outline. So break up your outline. So now you're sat down. I'll usually bring a little pad or something to sit on.
So you don't freeze
so
to
I
death.
don't freeze, or so that I'll sit still, because again, back to their eyesight and motion, you don't want to move. You want to minimize movement. Obviously, if you're working a call, you're going to have to move, but I'll get my rifle on sticks. I'll pan a little bit and try not to move a lot, but I'll pan a little bit to know, and sometimes I don't need to now because I have a little more experience, but I'll know, well, where can I shoot? Can I kill the coyote? Can I point to where the coyote is with my sticks, my shooting sticks, the way that I want? I do use shooting sticks or a bipod if I'm going to be prone. And then I'm good to go. And then I just wait. I mean, this is something that a lot of people don't do, but it's still good on technical difficulties.
Yeah. You hear the fuzz?
Not on mine, no. Anyway, then I just wait, and it's hard at that point because you're ready to go. You're charged up. You're like, let's kill something. And it's a good idea just to wait and let the area quiet down and let it get back to normal and the normal patterns. You'd be shocked and amazed at how loud people are when they walk as hunters. And I say this because I've been sitting as a predator hunter and hearing people walk from, like a half mile away. And it's loud.
And once your senses essentially become acclimated to your environment, you can pick those things up without hearing enhancers, without the things that a lot of people are using nowadays. But if you just sit back, relax, let the situation develop, it sounds really, really weird and really, really hippie-ish, but become one with your environment.
Exactly. Let things settle down.
You are now kind of elevating yourself closer to the level of being that apex predator in the apex predator's backyard.
You're in his backyard, and
right.
and that's just, I can hear people move. The coyote can hear you from 10 times that far. So anyway, get it. And it isn't bad that they heard something unusual in their environment. You just don't want to give them any confirmation. So that's why you wait a little bit, and then a lot of times I've glassed coyotes and watched them coming into a call, a mile or more away, and they'll get distracted by a mouse and they'll start mousing and everything. So, just let them kind of get distracted. They might have been listening to you one hill or two hills over when you're doing your approach, but you give them 5 minutes, they'll forget about you.
But they get curious.
And that's the thing is, then you hit the call. And so to your original question, what do I do first? A lot of the time I will do a challenge or just either a lone howl on a hand call. Some people like that, some people don't. Another initial call I'll do is a relatively quiet baby cottontail on the Fox Pro with the volume down, just in case there's something right around the corner. I don't want to blast them out.
Because they know what that really sounds like, and
right.
They know what is coming out of a speaker.
Right, that's kind of loud, guys. Yeah. So yeah, you're trying to do that a little bit, and then typical set will be, probably, it depends on the terrain, it depends on where I am, but I'll probably do between 30 and 45 minutes. If The situation is that they could be coming from a long way away. I'll go a little bit longer, and I've killed coyotes at 40 minutes, 45, 50 minutes. It just took them a long time to get there, or it took them a long time to decide to commit. But it also depends on the terrain and what the situation is. More than 50% of the coyotes I've killed have been less than 5-minute stands, because
in and out, man. Right?
Yeah, you just did it right. They happened to be there. You fooled them, and here they come. Right? Had that just the other day on that accidental puppy distress call. Called those 3, and then you also have to make the shot. There's 2 other things. If you have a running coyote that's running at you, if they're in the place that you wanted to kill them, hopefully you've picked that for good reasons. For example, if they come closer, they might wind you or whatever, or if they come closer, they might get behind cover and you can't see them. So if there's that issue, you need to kill them right there in the kill zone. And if they're running, until people do this for the first time, they might not believe it. All you have to do is bark at them like a dog. I mean, literally bark like a dog, and they will just stop. And you get on them with the scope, you're tracking them, you bark, they stop, you dump them, just like that. I mean, that is the ideal situation right there.
Wow. See, so all of my experience, and I will not ever claim to kill a bunch of coyotes. I might have 5 or 10 underneath my belt, but the most recent one was New Year's Day of last year. I haven't been home since coyote season has, the quote-unquote coyote season, the optimal time to hunt coyotes has kind of been here. So last New Year's Day, I killed one at about 300 yards.
Nice.
And it was 2 of them came in. My cousin and I were out sitting and called them in with the Fox Pro. We could not get them to come any closer. And I'd be lying to you if I told you I knew exactly, I had dedicated to memory what to do, because at that point that adrenaline was still kicking. I saw 2 coyotes. They came in, sat down at about 300 yards, and stayed there. My cousin barked at him like you just said. He barked at him a couple times with a hand call, and they turned and looked, and just like severe ADD, like puppies, right? Same thing. We coordinated 1, 2, 3 and shot, missed one, and the other one laid down right there. So to say that there's a formula to it, I'm sure there is. I don't know it. And if there was a formula, you have it figured out. Like, as far as the methodology of what you do. So, to the listeners, if you're wanting to hunt coyotes, it's like Steve said, you're going to have to basically fill and flow, right? Is that what you're saying? Like, adjust to your terrain, kind of have a standard, but just be flexible the whole time.
Yeah. Be quiet, go where they are, minimize movement once you're on the stand, and give it a try. And the other thing about calls too is, like on hand calls, so electronic calls haven't been around that long, but they are a great way to get going fast, and those calls are real good. If you wanted to try it and you didn't feel like you had that much money to invest initially, a hand call like a Zeps or something like that, you can get one of those, and you can just practice a little bit, read the package, and practice at home a little bit. But the key thing is, it doesn't have to be perfect. Now, nothing against the guys that win the world championships. I mean, those guys kill more coyotes because they are perfect, and they're way better than me. But I can tell you, I can think back at some of the early calling that I did, and I was making some pretty weird sounds, but the coyote showed up anyway.
Right. So
I wouldn't, just don't worry about it. Once you find something that works, you just keep doing it.
Stick with it. So basically don't be married to one specific thing.
Yeah. Keep it, experiment, pay attention. If you got a little bit selective memory like I have, you might want to make notes,
right,
as to what worked that time, and then just stick with it. Yeah. And you touched on one other thing about the optimal time. So there is an optimal time to hunt coyotes, which is in the wintertime once they're furred up, and that's if you're really after the whole package and you want You want the pelt, which are commercially valuable, by the way, too, or if you want it as a trophy for yourself. But one of the things I like about coyote hunting is this is something you can do year-round, pretty much in any state. Most states don't even have any type of season. Some do, and the ones that do have no limit. A lot of ranchers want them gone, so you can get access pretty easily. So it's one of those things that you can do kind of anytime, anywhere, because they're pretty much throughout the whole U.S.
If you can sit in the summertime and not get carried away by mosquitoes and everything else.
Yeah, or attacked by ticks or whatever. That's one time when I don't actually do it, but yeah, and then in springtime and stuff when they're having pups, I generally won't unless there's a rancher who has a problem. And I mean, for me, the rancher makes the decisions. And
right.
If they want them gone, then I try to do them a favor.
Well, so where I live, part of the land that I hunt is essentially a free-range cattle farm. These guys make their money off of cattle. And so, free range, these cows have calves, and calves get eaten by coyotes. They pack up on them and devour them.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I've gotten calls wintertime, summertime, and big cows, big cattle get devoured as well. I mean, they are equal opportunists when it comes to food. Right.
Plus, where there's an old saying, where there's cows, there's coyotes, and those coyotes would be opportunistic. And when that cow is having her calf, she's pretty vulnerable right then. She's not moving, right? She's stationary, and you're right. There are definitely calf and cow killers out there, and that's a lot of money for a rancher. So it's there's been different studies done on whether that helps or not. But the one thing I would offer is, at that particular time, me eliminating that coyote from that particular field is helping all of those cows right then.
Absolutely. And with living where I live, agriculture and that business per se is a very valuable source of income for a lot of people.
Right. That's their job.
So I want to touch on gear. We got about 10 minutes left. I want to touch on gear. Just for the record, this is not a plug for any one specific type of gear, but I want to know what you use, and then I'll tell you what I use, and then we can, you tell me what you think.
Okay, so
let's go from camouflage to bang sticks to what you're shooting through those. And I know you touched on the rifle and you touched on your suppressor, but like your clothing, like any specific type of camouflage pants, or just talking woodland or desert or
where I live. So where I hunt most of the time would be Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, and most of the time I'm hunting coyotes is not when things are green. And so any pants that I can't actually remember the pattern, but they're brownish, brownish camo. So anything that's like that, I certainly wouldn't want, bright green camis or anything.
Right.
But and there's an article done a long time ago by a guy who thought camo was a bunch of BS, and so he went coyote hunting in a Santa Claus outfit, and he killed a coyote, and he's trying to prove a point. But for me, I wear what makes me confident and comfortable. And the more confident I am, the more aware I am on the stand. That's a whole other thing we could talk about. But where I am the predator. I am alert and so on. So that's what I wear. Just some good hiking boots. I wear Danners, and I wear different Danners depending on the situation.
How you're getting in, how you're getting out.
What's the terrain and what's the temp.
Right.
And so that's that. And then moving up, then I've got, I'm trying to think of the name of the company that makes it, but I think it's from All Predator Calls. I got just this ghillie that I throw over the top of whatever. And it's just a synthetic ghillie. And then, like I said, just a regular camo boonie hat that I have attached a whole bunch of material to make it like a hood. And so and then a face mask. I use it's like a half or a 3/4 face mask. So and always gloves, regardless of temperature, because my white hands are really easy to see when I move them. And so I, camouflage those. So that's kind of my camo setup.
Okay. So your rifle's kind of a Franken gun, so to speak. You've set it up to where it's your your preferred hard end rifle, right?
The one I use the most is, I mean, I have a bunch of ARs, but the one I use the most, I Cerakoted it, and
You did an article on that too, didn't you?
I did, yeah,
when you
for
Cerakoted.
AR guns and hunting, yep, and just a do-it-yourself Cerakote wasn't that difficult, and it's such a better, coating than rattle can. I've rattle canned some too, but you know what it's like when you get a couple of rounds downrange on a rattle can, you smell it, it sticks to you.
Right.
You put any sort of solvents on it, it kind of gets gooey. So yeah, Cerakote's great. So it's Cerakoted, and that's in that same kind of a brown, in the browns and the sand colors, because you just can't see it in Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, in those that time of the year. Got it, like I said, a suppressor. Very, very accurate. This rig is really accurate. It's probably about quarter MOA, I would say.
Wow.
If I do my part, it's been surprisingly accurate, but it's the upper was direct from AR Performance. Harrison Bean made that for me, and the suppressor is SRT Hurricane Titanium from Doug Melton, and that combination with this Hornady 60 grain VMAXs, that works really well. Lots of dead right there. So I use, like I said before, I use a Mark 6 Loophole.
So back to Hornady. So I went on my first spot and stock hog hunt down in Georgia last 2 Februarys ago, and I was running a Lancer, both the L30 heavy metal and the L15 Patrol, and I thought for sure that the L30 was going to outperform. Not that it didn't outperform, but it just so happened when we came up on a pack of hogs, or I don't know what the correct vernacular is.
Sounder. It's a sounder of hogs.
A sounder of hogs. So we came up on a sounder of hogs, myself and Sean Utley, where we low crawled up because we heard them. We low crawled up to them, and from about 250 yards away, we set up prone. They didn't hear us, didn't smell us, didn't see us, although hogs generally have horrible senses. They are not like coyotes. So we weren't particularly quiet, but we weren't loud. We were aware of what was going on around us and what was out in front of us. Nonetheless, I had the Hornady 77 grain tap rounds loaded. One round right to 300-pound hog's pump house, and it shut her down instantly. And I was extremely surprised, especially how tough a hog is, the distance.
Yeah, definitely.
All those variables, come into play, and that round shut her down. She didn't take a step. We got her back to the skin house. We skinned her up, and it was a field to fork thing. We cut the straps out and had those for dinner, but the point of that is when we skinned her out and we gutted her out, her vitals, her heart, her vitals were gel. I mean, it wasn't like it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Super, super impressed. Obviously a hog is a lot more dense than a coyote.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, those terminal ballistics play a key role when you're speaking in terms of ethical shots. And
yeah, the VMAX gets it done. It ends it. I mean, a good shot placement with VMAX on a coyote. I mean, you can use 50s, 50 grain, and most of my rifles will shoot the Fiocchi 50 grains really, really well. It's relatively inexpensive ammunition. But I've been using Blue Box, Black Hills, loaded with 60 grain. So I got, a little bit more, 20% for you math people, a little bit more mass behind my bullet, sacrifice a little bit of velocity, but I got plenty of velocity for what I'm doing, and it hits them really hard. And it's, a lot of times in the snow is painted quite a bit as a result.
Right.
Which
make for good pictures.
Right, it does, yeah. It's not for all audiences, but yeah,
right.
Definitely. Yep.
So one more thing I want to touch on before we close this thing out, Steve, is taking that ethical shot. What does an ethical shot look like to you? Everything from foreground to background to distance to taking a shot that is going to basically not make that animal suffer. And I'm not talking in terms of coyotes. I'm talking to any animal as you are hunting from distance. So being a hunter, A lot of people immediately, people that are not into it or don't take it serious as we do, they look at they generally look at hunters as your atypical quote unquote gun nuts, right? So they don't know that we take those ethical shots in consideration. They don't know that we are hunting instead of going out and killing. What does an ethical shot look like to you?
Well, yeah. So it would vary. It vary depending on the circumstance, the rifle, the people, the prey, the environment in terms of what the actual distance was and that type of thing. But the thing that all of the circumstances would have in common would be that my confidence level that I know that I can make a shot, and that has to do with practicing and knowing your abilities. And by that, I don't mean going to the 100-yard range when it's nice outside
with zero environmental conditions.
With zero environmentals and being prone with a bipod or even off a sandbag or whatever and shooting a couple of rounds. That's not what I mean. What I mean is I've got some steel targets, which are really good for this as long as the fire conditions are fine. And putting them out at distances, like for coyotes, for example, at different distances. I made a video on this too, that, some random distances like 88 yards, 340 yards or something like that. Old 4-inch steel from MGM targets. And
Travis makes some good targets.
He does make some good targets. And, they'll outlast me and the kids can fight over them. But and then also being in the position that I would normally shoot from for coyotes, since we're talking about that, for example. So I happen to know, I know my ballistics. I've got a couple of ballistic calculators that I use and remind myself from time to time. I look at them and verify. The other thing I forgot to mention earlier was when you get to a coyote stand, when you're letting things quiet down, having your rangefinder and ranging a few landmarks if you're in big country like I am a lot. And so then I know, we talked about earlier, like where I want to kill the coyote, I can set up a kill radius so that I know based on my ballistics, it's point and click anywhere from there in, from that big rock out there or whatever.
So in a tactical scenario, we call that a range card.
Okay.
Right?
Range
so
card, then.
We have everything that's out in front of us. We have our left and right lateral limits. We have our foreground, our background, distances, and like you said, you take key terrain features, you laze that, so you annotate that if you have the time, you annotate that on your card, and your distances that you're shooting to take that guesswork out of the fact for, again, in a hunter's standpoint, ethical shot from a sniper's standpoint, a tactical shot.
Sure.
Right?
Exactly. So, and then you mentioned, foreground, background. Obviously, it all depends on the terrain and everything, but you don't want to shoot at a skyline coyote, right? Something that's on top of a hill, because you don't actually know where that round's going to go if you miss the coyote, which happens. So, sometimes you got to let them keep coming or moving or whatever.
And if the shot's not there,
the shot's not there. It's just a coyote or a deer or whatever. It's just not worth it.
Right.
Knowing, it's, the basic 4 rules of firearm safety, but being aware of your target, what's beyond it and what's around it, and knowing that you're responsible for every round that goes down range.
Right.
But back to, confidence, you've practiced, you can make the shot. Everybody misses, but that's not the point. The point is taking shots you should be able to make and have high confidence that you'd be able to make, and it'll be a good hit. And, you've got a good angle, so you got good shot at vitals. You know what the vitals are. I mean, not to be basic, but the anatomy of the animal you're after, and which by the way, on a coyote's a little bit different than a deer.
I was just about to say that. I mean, they have graphic targets that you can purchase and study the vitals.
And there's some stuff online. There's a couple of really good pictures out there online, and it shows you that, for a coyote, if they're broadside, if you follow that front leg up, it's actually, you don't go back behind there. It just draws a straight line for you. And there's some fur patterns on all coyotes that if you look at any coyote pictures, you see what I mean. Just follow that line up and put one there, and you can see that effectiveness diameter is pretty big right about their center mass.
Right. And growing up, again, hunted deer, but not as avid as a lot of people in my family, a lot of people in the area. But that was huge. I mean, first and foremost, obviously we've been introduced or imprinted with firearms, but the next thing is you study the deer, you study the vitals, and that, a lot of people think it's cool and funny, to hit a coyote or another nuisance animal on their back quarter, to where when you shoot them, they yip and they turn around and they start biting at it. People think that is,
well, those aren't people I'd hang out with. So.
Right. Those are people who think that's funny, but at the end of the day, being hunters, we are also conservationists. And that's another point of being here at doing this here at SHOT Show, because I think it kind of drives that point home of, yes, we love guns. We like the black guns. We like the tactical guns, but we've also grown up under that same fiber, so to speak, of, we're on this earth, man. Like, we love hunting. We're going to try to do everything we can to conserve, so our kids can carry on what we grew up doing. Our kids can carry on what our passions are.
Absolutely.
I think the whole ethical, like taking ethical shots piece to hunting is very important. That a lot of people kind of disregard in most cases, just because they want to get out and they want to hunt, which is commendable. However, knowing how to do all of it and taking the totality of the entire situation into account, I think is equally as important as bagging as many coyotes as you can.
Yeah, and everybody seems to want to shoot 1,000 yards these days, or even a mile, I guess, is the new fashion statement. But just because you have a rifle that can shoot that far doesn't mean you should shoot that far. So just knowing your limits and staying within those, and actually it's going to be more fun for you anyway.
Right. More of a immediate gratification rather than a discouragement. So, well, Steve, I think we are just about out of time. You got to catch a flight.
I do.
You got to catch a flight back up to Oregon and spend time with that family.
That's right.
So we thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
This is not going to be the last one, because we want to talk about your 3-gun up and coming stuff too, don't we?
3-gun's fun.
It is. I've never done it, but you've been trying to get me. You've been trying to get me to tag along for a while, and it just time never seems to be on my.
We'll get you on
my
the
side.
range.
There we go. So, again, this is Steve Gaspar, guys. Steve, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Oh, well, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at sendit223 on Instagram.
Okay.
And that's where you can find me. And I'm a freelance writer. I write for a lot of different publications.
Your most notable AR Guns and Hunting, correct?
AR Guns and Hunting. I've probably done more for them, but I've written for Gun Dog Magazine and Point and Dog Journal and Shooting Sports Retailer, other stuff, Predator Extreme. So everybody, again, Sendit223 is Steve's Instagram handle, and if you see AR Guns and Hunting on the newsstands or online, you can go check him out. He writes very well and takes some pretty phenomenal photos. I always enjoy reading his stuff. So, Steve, again, I thank you, and we will talk to you soon. All right, thanks.
This is the Unsuppressed Gun Talk Radio here at SHOT Show 2018, wrapping up. So thanks for listening, and stay tuned.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight